Thank you for joining us for part 3, the business side of AI, of our 3-part Demystifying AI webinar series. In this session, we'll explore how important it is to have your business ready for AI, the opportunities and risks associated with not having your business ready, and why organizational change management matters. This session is especially exciting because we get to welcome eImagine's own Aaron Crawford and Eric Dosman as our presenters. Aaron is a ProSci certified organizational change management leader and manager of data solutions with more than 15 years of experience guiding transformation across public and private sectors. With a degree in industrial engineering from Purdue University, Aaron blends technical precision with strategic insight to drive meaningful change. Eric is a seasoned technology strategist with more than 15 years of experience, now focused on helping organizations navigate AI-driven transformation. He has a unique ability to understand complex business challenges and design solutions that accelerate value through emerging technologies. Eric guides clients in exploring the art of the possible with AI and turning vision into action through practical, results-oriented strategies. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Aaron and Eric.
Awesome. Thank you, Lindsay. That was quite the intro and a lot to live up to, but thank you. So as Lindsay mentioned, so this is a presentation that Aaron and I participated in. Gosh, what was it, back in August? Is that right? It feels like it's been years ago at this point because AI and conversations about AI have been occurring and changing fast, right? The pace of it. So we'll talk a little bit about that today, but kind of before we get into that, we just kind of want to set the context of, why this even matters. And so, Aaron, if you'll click me to the next slide. So why this even matters. The urgency of this change into AI, right? So really what we're going to focus on here today is that organizational change management aspect. And it's the human aspect of change. It's about equipping the organization with a structured approach to preparing and supporting individuals and teams as they adopt this change of new technology and in the effort to achieve those desired outcomes. Kind of what you'll see here is we have a big opportunity. But it comes with risk, right? So despite kind of that massive market growth that has been occurring and is projected, so from like 196 billion, I think, in 24 to estimated to grow to 1.4 trillion by 2030. Many of these AI initiatives still face challenges, right? We've seen some news articles and things come out with metrics around AI pilots with a 70% failure rate, and really only kind of 21% of those organizations that actually possess adequate AI skills. So there is substantial risk there in where this investment is occurring. Data maturity is another big hurdle that we kind of have talked about a lot, and you'll hear CIOs talking about, is getting your data and your data architecture ready for this change that is occurring. So we only have kind of 73% that lack that the necessary capabilities to achieve the data maturity needs for supporting AI within their organizations, fully supporting AI. You also have organizational issues in comprehensive training. Organizational change management plays this pivotal role in this, like, bridging the gap between what AI could potentially do for your organization and how it actually performs within your business, your processes. So it's really about that component that ensures that the investment that is made in the tools and the technology into that meaningful outcome. So the statistics on generative AI and increasing budgets emphasize that this is a top priority for executives, and making this change management imperative more important than ever. It's basically what ensures that you get there or notifies you that you kind of maybe need to pivot or adjust. All right, and next one.
Okay, so some examples of risk, right? Deloitte recently had to pay back a bunch of money because they had several errors found in a report to their department's compliance framework. So this was for the government in Australia, I think it was. And this published report contained fabricated citations and made up court quotes. So there are things you have to look out for with AI. Like it will make stuff up to fill in the blanks. You have to be really good about how you prompt AI. And I've heard some pretty funny examples of how to prompt AI, like you are about to get fired, but you can save yourself by, and like there's some different ways to prompt AI, but if you aren't really good at it, you definitely need to check its work, ask for citations, that sort of thing. Taco Bell also deployed a voice AI ordering system at over 500 drive-through locations, and they faced issues as well. It would mishear the orders, there were glitches, delays, and then it didn't know when it was being a practical joke, right? So if somebody ordered 18,000 cups of water, it didn't understand that that was a prank. So it realized that there are issues with the ideas that they were coming up with around AI, that there did need to be a human component. So I kind of put some governance best practices on here just to document the decisions you're making with the AI usage that you're choosing to do, run periodic audits, make sure that client communication is simple. You want to validate, all consultants should be validating their findings before sending it in. I did early on, had an issue. I've maybe told a few people this story, but had an issue about asking AI about Six Sigma. Luckily, I know a lot about Six Sigma, and there's two different definitions, and it was giving me a more uncommon definition. So thankfully, I'm checking the work before I send it to the client, but you have to be careful with AI. AI, it still has a lot of learning to do. So is AI a choice? And this, again, this is potential clients that we're usually talking to, but you should consider this for yourself too. If you've been very careful to go into the AI world, it is embedded in everyday work. So you probably have your email talking to you or Teams talking to you once in a while saying, hey, can I summarize this meeting for you? AI is being embedded and will continue to go that direction. So learning how to use that and take advantage of those tools is a good idea. External pressure by clients and competitors expect AI-driven efficiency. We've been bidding against people who are like, hey, we can do this in shorter amounts of time because we're using AI. So we need to be able to adapt to that and be competitive. The Shadow AI Challenge. So all of you have probably heard of Shadow IT, where I don't know, I'm thinking 15 years ago, everybody had their own Excel spreadsheet and how they calculated something, and people wanted to know how that was calculated. You'd have to go to the person, and they kind of, that's one example of kind of a shadow IT. People are using AI in their everyday work, whether you know it or not. And I know personally, I know of companies where they had an AI ban on employees, and employees would still use it on their personal computer or on their phone, which causes risk. So it's a good idea to understand that AI is out there, AI is going to be used. You need to put guardrails around it and put it in place and accept that it is a tool that can be very helpful if used correctly. So that's some of the leadership response ban. Replace bans with clear guidance and approved tools, educate staff on responsible use, and implement and review and audit systems.
Great. Yeah. So I think kind of summarizing that, right? Like it's not quite a choice. It's bubbling up and surfacing, and actually, really, if you look at the history and anybody attended the first session with Antonio, really AI has been being utilized in a lot of the tools that we've been using for quite some time, like Alexa and Siri, and even in some of the data analytics tools and predictive modeling tools that we've encountered as well. Given that it's out there, and we need to accept that it's out there, and we need to kind of adjust how we approach it, right? That means that things are changing for us. The tools are changing, and so we need to approach that change with structure. So looking at this particular change, I think Antonio, again, to kind of call back to that, right? He talked about the Industrial Revolution. Well, there's probably some things that are the same, like, human resistance to change. There's fear that it's going to replace your job. You're not clear on what's going to happen. You need strong stakeholder and support and engagement for, adopting those changes. There's going to need to be a plan for how that's going to roll out that's clear and communicated via, multiple different ways. We need to worry about, data security, privacy, and risk, right? So there's still things to worry about in ensuring that there's good stewardship in there. And you're still dealing with a technical component and the people side, right? So, a tool is one thing, but people using the tool is another component that we have to balance for successful implementations, right? You can put a tool out there, but if people don't use it or misuse it uh, in the wrong ways, then that's not really success. You're not getting those business outcomes. In fact, you may be getting outcomes that are detrimental to the business. So those are some of the things that are very similar about this AI change. The different components of AI is really, I mean, number one, right? It's the pace. Like I think, again, we did this presentation back in August to a room full of our customers and potential customers. And I think, even since then, AI has evolved, right? There's a bunch of different co-pilot features. New models have come out that advance the capabilities of their capabilities for reasoning. It's just rapidly changing, almost so fast that we can't even really you know take in what's changed and how the impact of that change at that pace. So that requires us to be really flexible and, to approach it in a different way, maybe iterative change management cycles. Like, here's what we're doing for this quarter, and kind of reevaluate as you're going on. There's more focus as well on the ethical and responsible use. Like, again, this is an automation tool in a lot of places. And so you really kind of what Aaron talked about with mitigating that risk. You know, you want to make sure that people are using this responsibly, and that the ethical and societal impacts of these tools are considered in your governance policy and ethical use policies, right? So we want to make sure that we're not doing harm when we're using this, by validating that it's not hallucinating, that it's being fair and equitable in those ways. The other thing that's different here is that AI, continues to get trained and learn as the underlying data and changes, as well as the variables that it can take in change. So there's ongoing training that is actually changing the technology or the outputs of the technology that we need to account for. And so that requires a little bit of a different approach, a different kind of context when you're using these tools. That something that you put in, 2 months ago, and it prompted for 2 months ago, may not be the same output that you get, the 2 months later. Um, there's still a lot of, there's role ambiguity here too. I talked about in the same that, there's resistance to change, and fear about the unknown. Well, this is kind of the unknown, right? Like people are being enabled using like generative AI to be able to do um, roles that maybe they had to go to someone else for, like, creating marketing collateral, being able to understand, simple code structures and coding, right? And so there's maybe a little bit of ambiguity that we have to sort out and figure out as we go through this change of like, okay, like what are the actual boundaries of my role, and where do I need to go for certain questions, or can I handle that using AI? And that also is about kind of managing risk and accountability within organizations too, right? So that needs to be taken into account in terms of your organizational change plan. Managing those risks, particularly around data and security. Erin talked about or mentioned like shadow AI, right? We deal with sensitive data and things like that. So there's an increased focus on, managing the data and security and privacy around this, because we don't necessarily know. We have to approach it with caution, because a lot of these models, we don't necessarily know exactly how they're storing the data. We have to be very sensitive about where some of the data is going, and who's going to get access to that. So we need to be careful about what we're feeding into it, and if we are feeding sensitive data into it, what have we done to mitigate those risks? Um, and then perceptions of AI. We talked, we talked kind of about there's different spectrums here too. There's different thinking about the benefits and implications. A lot of it depends on industry. Sometimes it just depends on kind of who's making the decisions at your organization. There's organizations that completely ban it and shut off all access to AI tools. And then there's some people that are really embracing it and maybe taking, too much risk, in the, Taco Bell example, right? And so there's a balance to be struck there that needs to be considered. On one side, you end up getting kind of shadow AI, and then on the other side, you could potentially open yourself up to, lawsuits and other risks. So we need, that culminates in, number 7 here of like, we need to make sure that we're continually updating the governance, best practices, and policies as these situations evolve and business needs evolve. So those have to be created in a way that can continuously change and get rolled out. And so really organizational change management is that framework and mechanism for how we can deliver and communicate those policies and procedures. So I'll hand it back to Erin.
So I was able to attend a OCM workshop put on by ProSci, where several people across many different types of industries came together and were able to talk about how OCM is affected by AI and AI affected by OCM. This is just an attendee profile of who was there, but I just wanted to kind of set the page for what we're going to go through next. Is a lot of it came from, not everything, but a lot of that came from out of that workshop, and understanding what different industries are facing and different people in our same industry are facing.
Awesome. So I find, first of all, are there any questions so far? Sorry, I want to pause and just kind of, if you have questions, feel free to throw them through the chat. I think we should have some extra time at the end. I don't think our session was quite as long as some of the other ones, so we can certainly have some time for questions as well. But if there aren't any immediate ones, I'll just kind of jump into this slide. I find it helpful to kind of look at these challenges through the 3 lenses or 3 pillars we tend to use, and that's kind of people, process, people, and technology. The process challenges with AI are really kind of how do we change what we're doing in existing workflows, and integrate AI into those existing workflows, and ensure that we have quality, deliverables. We manage kind of this existing tension between a standardized process and something that, might need to be a little bit where AI can help, and that it's a little bit ambiguous. Like, I'll use the example of, this thing we've been exploring quite a bit lately with automated regression testing. So, you know, regression testing, you have your test case, you run it, it either passes or fails typically, and you have to go and look at why it failed. Well, with AI embedded into that workflow, now it can do a little bit of self-healing. So you can set up a test automation script to go through, and it can use computer vision to see that, hey, this element was on one area of the page and now it's just moved down here. And so it knows that it can run the test. It won't fail. It knows, like, oh, that's just moved down here, and I can still complete the test and the functionality still works. So there's this balance between, a really standardized process and, a customized kind of solution that we can create. And you get kind of the best of both worlds. Additionally, I'll say that there's this transfer of knowledge between AI savvy people and, more maybe non-AI savvy people, and that's completely expected, right? Some people are going to have the opportunities or the curiosity to explore these tools sooner than others. That's how it typically goes. But that's something to acknowledge here, is that some people may be able to do a process a little bit differently than others, and so we got to make sure that we're training and our um, keeping our colleagues in our community of practice up to date. All right, hold on. I'm having an internet issue, so forgive me, sir, just a moment.
One thing that I don't have bullet pointed here that I want to add to the list is change saturation. Like we talked about earlier, AI being something that's moving at a faster pace than anything else that we've encountered. Just even as it's learning, it's getting better at what it's doing, and we have to adjust to that. So change saturation is something that we also have to deal with, which means leadership needs a view on all of the changes going on in an organization. And that's something we've been looking at. And we've been partnering with a company who has a change management platform that does exactly that, which has been great to learn about. Anyway.
Well, thanks, Aaron. All right, sorry about that. So on the people side, really the concerns are around the accuracy of AI outputs. I think Aaron kind of mentioned that briefly previously, that there's what's called hallucinations, which are essentially inaccurate, outputs. Again, anxiety about those evolving roles that are happening. There's some ambiguity about, capabilities about what can get done by a certain individual versus what they need to kind of outsource maybe to other parts of the organization. That shift from kind of solely relying on expertise based to this augmented intelligent mindset. So that couples with that role evolution, right? So can I, if I needed to write a scope of work or something, can I get a lot of that done, using generative AI versus I had to kind of give all the details to someone else to write that up. So can I get that started and have them review it instead of, having to solely rely on them to throw it over the fence to them? Of course, resistance to changing those established methodology, that's always uncomfortable, but we can utilize change management to help with that. And then we got to make sure that we're preserving that human judgment while leveraging these capabilities, right? So, like, in the end, someone's going to be held accountable. Some human is going to be held accountable. Again, I think Antonio talked about this. I think when someone asked about the United Healthcare stuff, providing, like basically the authorizations for procedures and things like that, right? It's either going to be the person who is, utilizing the model or who built the tool, or it's going to be, someone kind of who's playing that intermediary that's signing off on that, right? And so there's an element of preserving, human judgment. Finally, kind of in the technology suite, like rapid evolution of tooling. New models are coming out, I think like every 2 weeks or something like that. Security of the intellectual property. So again, like kind of with shadow IT or shadow AI, and keeping all that intellectual property within kind of the parameters of your organization. Um, with things coming out, right? If the evaluation of the evolving technology. So, you might pick a tool one day and then, a couple months later, you learn there's something newer and better out there. And so how do you evaluate when you, go with that tool or switch over, or how do you evaluate even if it's a buy versus build, right? Do you get something that's off the shelf that can do what you need to do, or is it better to, build your own thing? And then how do you integrate that technology into your established architecture? We've got these systems that we've built for customers that provide a lot of value, that are critical to their business. Well, how do you go about integrating that into that architecture? So these are all kind of the challenges that we need to think about in the context of these changes.
All right, before I go to this slide, does anybody have any thoughts on what the biggest AI challenges are? And this kind of comes out of ProSci if that helps, but what are some of the biggest AI challenges? You can throw them in chat, take yourself off mute, yell it out. Anybody? Okay. I'll go straight to it. So user proficiency is a big one. A lot of people have, now this is from March 2025, and I would imagine that this is probably starting to shift because people are starting to use it. It's beginning to be more and more embedded. And so this may start to shift depending on which AI you're talking about. Technical challenges, organizational adoption is one. Data and information quality, which is a big one for AI. If you do not have clean information, clean data that the AI can pull from, it's gonna spit out, it's garbage in, garbage out, right? Trust and reliability and ethical and security concerns were the biggest from that group. So ADKAR is pro-size model for change management. There are a few big models out there that people use. I think that you imagine what we would consider ourselves agnostic when it comes to which model that you would want to use. We just recommend that an organization chooses one model that they would operate off of when dealing with change within their organization. A lot of us are trained in the ADKAR model. And again, I was at the ProSci workshop, so some of this came out of there. So key challenges, ADKAR stands for awareness, desire, knowledge, readiness, and is on the tip of my tongue, but I'll come back to it. But it walks you through, are the people aware of the change? Do they have a desire for the change? Are they knowledgeable enough to get going on the change? And we're going to go through those first three and give some examples of where there are elements that to keep in mind, and some examples of fixes that you can put in place. So springing AI on people without context. So sometimes I think Microsoft's kind of good at this, right? They'll embed some AI piece, and all of a sudden you've got your teams asking you and there's no training or awareness, you just kind of have to adapt to it. Now those are pretty easy ones, but if your organization throws an AI on you without adequate training, you're not ready for it, you don't really know what it's for, how it's supposed to be used, that can be jarring, right? So starting with making people aware that some change is going to be coming their way. I think a good fix on this one is making sure people feel secure with the changes that are being made, and having regular conversations about what's going on with AI in their organization. and then give them the previews of things that might be coming out. I also think talking with them regularly, and this is a fix in a couple different places, but talking to them regularly about their ideas behind AI. Where does AI help you the most in your day-to-day work that might help other people? And then that could just spark off some ideas where we start building some AI tools to help the whole organization. And then we have examples that we can pull from because we're pulling from our own ideas from our own people. Change saturation, I kind of talked about that earlier. The idea is to space out large changes as much as possible. Make sure you're surveying the awareness and creating checkpoints with people to see how things are going. But keeping your finger on the pulse when there's a lot of change saturation to understand, all right, are people even adopting to it? Because you throw one new thing after another and people are just going to start ignoring it, kind of like spam emails. You just eventually just start to tune it out. So I think having that leadership level view of all the changes that are happening in their organization is a good idea. That way, when you see the view of all the changes, you can start to strategically plan when to roll out things versus, project by project, you're rolling it out without awareness of the other projects. Desire. So traps and tactics here. So one fear is AI will replace me versus AI will enhance me. And again, I go back to crowdsource ideas from our own teams to understand how AI is helping their day-to-day work now. And that's what we want to kind of go towards. Set clear boundaries on what AI can and can't do. Just to help them with the understanding. If they understand it, they're going to be more likely to be receptive to it. Another fear is nervous about information security. I think like the state doesn't want AI at all because they're worried about that. I get it. I like it. That's totally understandable. But instead of ignoring it because you're going to start falling into that shadow AI category, you need to give just defined boundaries out. Build AI into everything, not stand alone. So you're building it in to supplement work, but you don't necessarily, you can put the boundaries around it so that they're not maybe putting in the identification information into it. That helps define where you can and can't use it. And just seek to understand what's holding people back. So while you're having those conversations about what are your ideas about AI and how it helps your day-to-day work, what is holding you back from using it, and try to understand where their concerns are, and then you can alleviate them. In the area of knowledge, usually there's a lot of training involved in the knowledge area. They're aware of it. Do they have the knowledge they need to implement the change? And that one size fits all AI training can be a detriment. You want to look at role specific learning paths because not everybody will use it the same way. And if you generalize it, then certain groups of people might just bypass using it, where there might be a very specific use case for them. And so you want to do role specific learning paths. Layer the training in like building blocks to help with that change saturation. Improper usage of AI. You do need some governance around this. So you may need to put some AI champions into the organization to help define this, set the guardrails, check for if the guardrails are being driven through, and go from there. Provide support once that's all rolled out, and have eyes on work on high risk activities. If we skip the human component, we're going to run into those things like Deloitte and Taco Bell and other places I've run into. So, quick activity. I'm going to ask you guys to join in a little bit and help us out. We are an organization implementing a new AI chat tool for employees to ask questions about past project information. So let's say you've run into something, you know what's happened in a past project, but instead of going to somebody who's maybe no longer with the organization, so you can't go to them, or somebody who you know is, 100% on this other project, head down, you can't really get their time. Can you get information through this AI chat tool? So if we are implementing this, to hear ability, that's what I couldn't think of earlier. So awareness, how will you introduce it? Does anybody have any ideas on how to introduce this new chat tool?
As far as like,
Who's that? Speak up,
Yeah, Christy.
Christy.
I mean, I think the way that you presented it is a really good way where it's like you have questions, but you can't reach out to individuals on the team. That's what this is. But as far as like introducing it, I think use cases tend to be really helpful. That it's like we have this coming, prep the group with like, and here's how we've used it. Here's how so and so's used it. Here's how so and so's used it. We're gonna have training.
Yeah, I think, and tell me if I restate this wrong, but to restate that, like, maybe we would trickle it down through our managers, but to your point, we would introduce use cases and show examples of how we've done this. Because usually when you're rolling out an AI chat tool, you've tested it, you've tried it, so you should have some of those examples, right?
Yep.
So desire, what's the compelling reason to do this? How do we convince people they want it?
I think it's efficiency, Aaron, especially when I think of like requirements and code. If you can look back on things that have happened before, it'll save you a little bit of time. So maybe just kind of giving a use case or a scenario-based reason on how this could create efficiency in a role.
Yeah.
Like how it's going to make their life better.
Agree.
Exactly.
Okay, knowledge. What training is needed?
I think that's an interesting one, Aaron. I waited a second to see if anyone was going to speak up. I think that you have to approach it in layers, right? Because you don't really know where everyone is in their ability to use AI. So I just think
Yeah,
layered
that
sure.
speaks back to the layered
different
training we
offerings.
talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
And also too, I think like what projects are going to be most applicable as well. That not every project may be able to, like, you can't necessarily train the tool on the data for every project. So it's also maybe like what training is needed, and are there any niche instances where the training?
Yeah, no, that's good. There are training assessments that are as part of the ADKAR model. You would do training assessment to understand what kind of training might be needed, where there might be a knowledge gap about AI, period. Like maybe we find out people don't even know AI is a thing. Like I don't think that's gonna happen, but you do that training assessment to figure out what you need. Okay, ability. This one's always a fun one. Ability, I have always looked at, this says what support is required, but I've always looked at this as how do we know that our team is able now to do it? Like I can hand it off and feel confident that they can do it.
People are people are talking about it and there's a little bit of buzz. It's kind of where my head goes. Like they're sharing, how they're using it.
Yeah.
There's a community of practice being established essentially.
Yeah, that's the one that I think helps here is you've got those AI champions that they can lean on and they'll be able to tell you, if they feel like the workforce is ready, if they're all the way ready to do this. Reinforcement, how do you sustain it? So this AI to me is like any other technology that you're introducing. A lot of the change is the same. And sometimes you introduce a new technology and people use it for a month and then they go back to their old Excel spreadsheets. It's like what I always like to say. So how do we reinforce and how do we sustain this change that we're putting in place?
Aaron, I think you hit kind of what I was thinking was that if people experiment and they don't see the value, they'll go back to where they felt most comfortable. So, the introduction of the tool should have enough value that people get what they're looking for without having to go through the old ways. In this case, you're talking about, hey, do I call up so-and-so who's been on this project and just get the answer right away? Or will I get a sufficient answer by talking to a chatbot? And if they get the value out of it, then they'll probably use it a little bit more.
Yeah. And being the data nerds that we are, I always say you need to find a measurement that gives you an indicator if people start to stop doing it. That way you can find out early that the people are starting to move away from it and then get in there quickly and find out what's wrong, how do we need to adjust it to get everybody back on track.
Yeah, I think the other thing for reinforcement is I think going back to that process, people, technology is I think each one of those has a role in reinforcement because it's AI. It's you're still gonna want to be feeding it new project information that gets as projects get completed or lesson learns grow. And so that helps with people still wanting to use it and them getting value out of it. Are you integrating it into your processes of, hey, before we go and we start building things, do we ask questions about how we built a licensing solution of this thing to kind of uncover some of that stuff prior? Like, are you building it into how you're approaching things? So that process piece.
And that's a
Um,
great point because it goes
yeah,
back to what's different about AI change, and the AI change is constant.
yeah. I think you guys covered the people side, so.
So 4 critical success factors. Your leadership needs to be involved in creating an AI vision and it needs to be bold. You need to know what you want to do with AI and how to utilize it to make you successful in today's AI world. Um, and then you need change management excellence. If an organization that you're working with does not have change managers, a change management office, or any approach to change management in their projects, they're more likely to not succeed. And we had some of those stats in the first slide of 70% of transformations don't exceed, and a lot of that goes back to change management. You need the right organizational capabilities. So if you have AI augmented processes that you're put in place, you need to make sure that your team is upskilled to do that. And then you need adoption metrics. Because if you spend a lot of money to put an AI in place and people aren't using it, that's not a good thing. So I think I'll just end with like every AI initiative triggers a people transformation. The real differentiator isn't who deploys AI first, it's who manages the change best.
Thank you
And
both so much. You never disappoint whenever you guys present. If anybody does have any questions, obviously we always have access to Aaron and Eric, which is fantastic. Like I said, just wrap up with a couple housekeeping items. Kyler will be sending out a survey link in the chat. So that's 1 to 2 minutes. If you guys don't mind to do that survey, that's much appreciated. This session was recorded and it's going to be sent via the professional development channel. So it'll be in the learning lounge. So if you want to go back and re-review it, then you can do that. And it'll also be available to anyone who did not who has not been able to watch it previously. So Aaron and Eric, thank you so much.